This is a download from the BBC. To find out more, visit bbc.co.uk/Radio 4.
And Afric Campbell, you, as I say, the author of, this is your third book, I think, on the floor. Yes. But you worked at Morgan Stanley for 13 years, and you were the first female managing director on the trading floor. So you know something about it, but from this, and therefore have been interested anyway, I imagine, in the idea of fiction set in the city.
Absolutely. And it's not surprising that writers now are drawn to it because it took a global crisis to see what the real drama had been there all the time. But the first fictional representation of finance was Bonfire of the Vanities, of course, Tom Wolfe's. And then we had the beginning of the Master of the Universe who arrived on the scene, followed by the movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko. And those were stories of 1980s excess rather than stories about finance. Now, of course, we have the end of that cycle and we have the fallout. So it's not surprising that readers would want to read about it. And fiction is a great way of telling the story from the character's point of view.
Do you think, Professor Sutherland, that the drama had been there all the time?
The drama of money, as I sort of... I was very struck by something that Mark Lawson said in a review of Robert Harris's The Fear Index. He said, I never understood what hedge funds were until I read this novel. And it seems to me that novels are a great educator. I mean, most of what I know about sort of history, I know from George MacDonald Fraser and Flashman. Most of what I know about sex, I know from novels I won't mention here. Most of what I know about science comes from science fiction. We tend to downgrade fiction when it really is very, very important component in our kind of general education.
Because it makes the understanding palatable?
Well, it's the sugarcoating theory, but also it explains. I mean, Afric's book is terribly interesting to me because, in fact, it takes a woman's angle on this. Now, it's a very, very blokish thing, high finance. I mean, you think of banker, you think of sort of, you think of, the pigs in Animal Farm who are all male. You do not. There are no females in Animal Farm, are there? Or very few, just a few chickens. But in fact, On the Floor is very much, not quite worm's eye view, but woman worm's eye view, which is very, very fascinating.
And the sheep were female.
Yes, they were. Yes, Boxer, though, I think, is the one I identify with. Sure.
But in this book, in that sense, in terms of what it's about, a woman in a man's world, could have been written at any time. It's not relative. I mean, it's not.
Absolutely, and it's not done enough. The story that we're given about why women don't get into senior positions is because men are keeping them out. I'm sure you have your own opinions on that, but that was not my experience. It had much more to do with women's self-selection. And in fact, if you talk to hedge fund managers today, they will tell you that they still can't find female traders to do the job.
And your argument in the book is that it's women's choice to leave.
I think that's a conversation that's not had often enough because it's perhaps sometimes easier to give the decision to someone else or to blame someone else. But I also think that in these novels about the so-called literary fiction novels about finance that are coming out now, women get a rough deal. They appear as shopaholic hysterics, latte drinking mothers who barely know who their children are, where they are, and the fathers, who the bankers and the hedge funds, are the new villains. Evil geniuses who want to destroy the world, or mad geniuses who suffer from paranoia.
Which makes one think, Professor Sutherland, if we're learning from these books, then we're learning a rather simplistic version of what the reality is, perhaps.
Well, I mean, you have to simplify things to understand them. I mean, hedge fund is a gross simplification of the kind of mathematical formulae which sort of Afric's very eloquent about in her book. I mean, we do actually have to boil things down to swallow them.
But in terms of who the villains are, because as Afric makes the point, the villains are the financiers rather than anybody else.
Well, I think that probably satisfies a popular desire to see these people pilloried. But the problem is there's a lot of missing characters, as you're well aware. Where are the politicians who are asleep at the wheel, who are too busy worrying about the next election? Where are the regulators? There's only one financial novel published in the States which features a regulator, and after all, the head chairman of the FSA was the one who said that the city was involved in socially useless...
So this theme of literature then, Professor Sutherland, has some way to run to incorporate all those other characters?
It has. As I read Afric's novel, it's very interesting. She chose 1991 when she herself was involved in the world of high finance. But what's interesting is the crisis of the book is the takeover by the machine. It's when the human element begins to disappear and the computer, in a sense, takes over. It's 2001, if you like, and it's a very, very interesting analysis, it seems to me, of where we are and what we've got to fear.